Cybernation Uncensored.
Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Crash Course tutorial series for Shadows of Esteren by Studio Agate. This video is all about the setting and style of the game, but before I get into it, let me first show you what Studio Agate has put out. They have a pronunciation guide. It is free to download. I'll include the link in the description of this video. You can get it from Drivethru as well as numerous other sites. But yeah, this game has some pretty interesting dialect, some old world words and dialect pulled from Celtic lore and more. So it can get a bit confusing. However, I do want to mention a couple things here. One, yes, they do have the pronunciation guide. You can lean on that. You can, use that to help you pronounce these interesting words. But also, don't get hung up on the semantics. The first rule of tabletop role-playing games is have fun. So like I said, don't get hung up on the semantics. Just make the words your own and keep moving forward and have fun. All right, so like I said, this video is all about the setting and style of Shadows of Esteren. And the first thing I want to mention is the fact that this game is a low fantasy, dark horror tabletop role-playing game with tones of romanticism and definite influence from Celtic lore. Now, what do I mean by low fantasy? Well, first, you're not going to play an elf. You're not going to deal with orcs and dragons and crazy creatures and things like that. It's very human-based. Now, there's multiple occupations and things that you can have within the human races and different, ethnic backgrounds and cultural backgrounds, depending on where you're from and things like that. But I'll get into the details of that sort of stuff in the character creation video of this Crash Course tutorial series. So look out for that video for those details. However, like I said, it's very human-based. So you're not going to be dealing with like elves and orcs and dragons and crazy stuff like that. And second, by low fantasy, I mean that there's not going to be a lot of like a magic domination. You're not going to have like super powered wizards just dominating the game. And that's not to say that there isn't some magic in the game, like maybe you're playing a magientist, which is a sort of magical scientist or mage scientist that harvests and processes or buys this material called flux that powers magical items. Or maybe you're a Demorthan, which is kind of like a druid character that uses this energy source called Rindus to basically perform these magical acts, very druid-like. Or maybe you're a monk or a priest of the temple or a person of the temple in which you're granted miracles by your god, which again kind of acts like magic. So you can see there are some low fantasy versions of magic and things like that in the game. So it's not completely null of all magic and things. It just has some details about it and some human-based styles within that magic that I really like. It feels very grounded, yet has some diversity within it like I just described. But again, I'll get into those details in the Crash Course tutorial series video about character creation and all those options. So look out for that video. The other thing I want to mention about this game is the fact that Studio Agate has put out some materials to really help it become immersive, and it just helps you dive into the setting and style. And I want to mention some of those things like their short story books that they have put out, like their Haunted series, their other novel. They have these novellas and novels they've put out. They even put out an album of music. You got to check that out, which you can find that in Syrinscape. If you're not familiar, Syrinscape is an official sponsor of Cybernation Uncensored. It's an awesome tool to add sounds to your gameplay. And yes, Studio Agate has partnered with them to put that album directly into Syrinscape so you can trigger the sounds and music throughout your gameplay. They've also created a comic book. They have a cookbook. They even have a video game. It's just an amazing company, an amazing game. And like I said, it's more than just a tabletop role-playing game. There's lots of other tools and things that you can use to really dive in and feel the world come to life. And I love that about Studio Agate. Now, this world that Shadows of Esteren is based in is very harsh, and I don't mean that just because it's easy to die, and you'll learn that in the combat crash course tutorial video, but because the world itself is actually harsh. The environment is brutal. Not just the world, the Cut Off Peninsula, and I'll show you that in a moment. I'll pull up the maps and we'll talk about that. But the world has an elongated sort of elliptical orbit, And because of that, it has extra long seasons, like decades long winter that's extremely harsh and cold. So the world itself is very brutal, and like I said, that's aside from combat, aside from dealing with NPCs and Fiondas, those evil creatures that I was kind of talking about earlier. The world itself is harsh. Just the environment, the seasons, the terrain, the harsh oceans, the mountains, all that sort of stuff. So that's one thing I want to explain, is that the world itself is almost its own entity that is brutal, that is absolutely brutal in itself, but also beautiful in the landscapes. And you'll see that as well in a moment when I get into style. I'll show you some imagery from the art books and stuff, and it'll really help set that tone. But I love it. And that's another thing to mention about Studio Agate, is that they put out that art book. I mentioned the short stories, the album, all that sort of stuff. They also put out an art book that it's a compilation of basically all the different books and things that they've put out, and kind of grabbing the favorites, art, sketch work and art and paintings and things from those, and put them all into an art book. And wow, it is absolutely amazing. It sets the tone. But I'll show you some of that in a moment. Let's first dive into the terrain and the world that Shadows of Esteren is living in. You can see here it is a huge peninsula called Tree Kazel. This peninsula is cut off from the rest of the continent. You can see it up there in the northern eastern section of the map. There's like a huge plateau wall. It's basically just mountainous terrain that cuts this peninsula off, making it kind of its own world, which is really awesome. It just feels, I don't know, just captured, and set in this world that you can just dive into without worry of spreading yourself too thin, if that makes sense. It's surrounded by really rough seas, aside from that mountainous rock wall. Just like I said, really setting in this peninsula, standing alone as your world. And then this peninsula, Tree Kazel, is broken up into 3 kingdoms. You can see Tal Kaer, Rays, and Gwydir. And again, these pronunciations, feel free to make this your own or refer to the pronunciation guide. You can also do some Googling. You can look up some Celtic lore influence. But again, don't get lost in the semantics. Just have fun. But you can see that right here you've got your 3 kingdoms set within Tree Kazel on this peninsula. And then further, that can be broken down into 9 dukedoms. So there's just a lot of rich lore within the setting of this game. And I want to mention that in the rule book, all this lore and even some of the rules are laid out in such a creative way. So when you dive into this, you're not just going to get cold rules listed in charts and then, lore broken into sections or whatever. And don't get me wrong, there is a beautiful timeline and things that you can follow and kind of get the basics down. But a majority of this book is written in such a creative way. It's written in a way as letters and messages and things like that from different characters to the kings and dukes and things like that, and just between each other, whether it's a Demorthan and a Magientist, and just arguments and conversations and letters. It's too much just to dive into in this one video, but I'm going to say that when you start reading it, you instantly just get lost in this world. It comes to life. It feels rich, and the stories just pull you in. It's amazing. Just the way that it's laid out is just very immersive. And then aside from that, they do drop in the rules. There are some charts and things that help you along the way. But like I said, the creative layout and writing of this, matched hand in hand with the amazing artwork, just sets this game apart from all other games I've seen and played, as far as rule books and such. It's just amazing. Now that we've touched on the setting and what makes up the world of Shadows of Esteren, let's talk about the style of the game. Before I get too much into it, and I want to kind of take us through this art book and kind of set the tone, let me first discuss the gameplay style. This game encourages you to lean into role play. Don't worry too much about the crunch. Worry more about the role play and having fun. An example of this would be, say your team enters a room. They find a cabin in the woods and they're searching for clues for a missing person that used to live there or something, just off the top of my head. Say they go in there and they're going to search the room. In a normal game, maybe they would say, okay, I enter the room, I look around, I want to search the room for any clues, any evidence. And you'd say, okay, give me your perception. Let's do a perception a skill check or something of the like. Well, in this game, if the characters are role playing this scene, they're describing it in detail, there's no need to roll the dice. Go with what they're role playing and what they're describing and create the story together. So, say they enter the room and they say, okay, I enter the room, I look around, I'm looking for any clues of this person, of them being here, where they might have went. Is there any food left out that was freshly cooked or maybe old, showing that they haven't been here in a while? I want to look under the bed in the bedroom. I want to look under the rug on the floor. I want to look behind paintings on the wall. I want to look everywhere. If they start describing those sorts of details, there's no need to roll the dice. Lean into those moments and role play it out. They're obviously expressing that scene in detail, and they're role playing it out in detail, and you need to lean into that and have fun with it. So don't get hung up on the dice and the crunch and the math of this game if you don't have to. You still can if you want to, and if there's moments that are kind of light, maybe the players aren't describing in detail that scene, absolutely roll the dice. Let's see what the outcome might be. But like I said, if things are being role played in detail and the game's just moving forward and you're collaborating on the story together, just go with that. Okay, now we're coming up to my favorite part of this game, and that is the artwork. Oh man, the style of this game is just absolutely amazing. Let's dive in. I have the art book right here. I do need to give you a warning that I could get lost in this. We could be here for hours. It's like a 200 plus page art book. I'm kidding. I'm going to try to just skip around and show the best of the best, just to give you an idea of the style. I promise I won't go through all 200 plus pages as much as I would love to, because I am addicted to this artwork. But yeah, okay, this is the Dark Romanticism, the Art of Shadows of Esteren. And yeah, Let's dive into this moody, stylized art that just sets the tone of this game. Look at that. Look at that. I just love it. All right, let's get into some landscapes. Like I said, I'm just going to skip around. I'm going to scroll through. We're just going to showcase some of this. All this art, all these sketches, all this stuff is from all the different artists that have put out content into all the different books and stuff for this game. They've made a compilation book of all of this stuff comprised into this one book, over 200 pages of just amazing art. Let me just scroll through, and you can see it sets the tone, just the harsh winters, the thick forests and mountain terrains. You'll see it gets into some of the oceans and the rough waters. It just really sets the tone. I love it. It also has some narratives here that explains what some of this art is, where it's from, some details, little excerpts from the books that they're from. Really great. Oh, look at that. I love that. Okay, cool. Before I just keep going on and on these landscapes, let's get into some of these characters. Let's see. Let's skip ahead. You might recognize her from the cover of their novella, Adelaine. You can see, some imagery here from the video game, from the comic book. Look at these characters. Just look how awesome. Look at these scenes. I could just get lost in these locations. I love the art of this game. And there's tons of it. The way that these books are laid out with the stories and art. It's very entertaining. It definitely doesn't feel like you're just cold learning rules in a world or whatever. Like, you absolutely get lost in this game, and I love it. Cool. Let's see. Oh, look at that. Oh, here's a prime example of the sort of like dark romanticism, like a cross between the dark horror romanticism. Just the fact, like, she's just staring out, like he's obviously trying to get her attention. Maybe he's been traveling too long and has upset her. Just look at the emotion in that image. I love it. Just sets such a tone. Look at that. So good. Wow. Look at that. Yeah, I could get lost in this. Like I said, I'm going to skip around here. Let's see. I want to show off some of the Fiondas, because these Fionds are basically These are the things that you're going to encounter. Like I said, there's not a lot of dragons and orcs and a bunch of, evil creatures and stuff, but there are these Fiondas, which are these entities. Each stand alone. They don't really work in groups or packs. They're each kind of their own entity based on elements or nature or something within the world itself. And they're usually triggered by human interaction or things that the humans have done to nature or an area. Maybe, like I said, it's reactionary to what the humans have done, or maybe it's a bit offensive too. These Fiondas they're evil. You can think of them kind of like almost like demons, shape-shifting demons, and they all kind of have their own unique sort of being or setting. Like, look at this. Just look at the difference between this, looking like from the woods or something, and this kind of breaking out from the building. Look at all the sort of tentacles and tendrils coming out and little teeth, thorny things, and just amazing. And then these more like creature, more like a monster. Look at these, more orc-like, if you will, almost humanoid in structure. Look at that. Look at this one, how it's kind of coming off from the woods. You can kind of see like the demonic face structuring from the branches, and wow, just so moody, such a vibe. And then look at this one, almost maybe a seductress or something, just very unique. And look at that, very creature-like. So anyways, I wanted to show off that. I wanted to kind of get into the Fiondas a little bit, just to kind of set the tone, so you see the sort of low fantasy, evil creature side of what you might be battling. And that's aside from humans and things that you're going to interact. Obviously, this world is going to have adversaries and antagonists, protagonists, all sorts, everything under the sun within a game that you would expect from a tabletop role-playing game. But like I said, it being low fantasy, I wanted to kind of show off exactly what that meant, so you don't think that it means that there's no magic or no monsters or no creatures, because that is not the case. There's definite tones of magic and fantasy and creature-esque bestiary and things like that. But again, it's very limited. It's very human-based and reality-based, which I like. It's not just over-the-top fantasy. But there you have it. There's Shadows of Esteren by Studio Agate. This video was all about the setting and style of the game. I hope you love it as much as I do. Make sure you check out all the other videos. I'm putting out videos about every aspect of this game, as well as a complete deep dive series. Don't miss anything, and go try out the game for yourself. I know you're going to love it. And I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Cyberpunk Uncensored.